Americans collectively owe $1.6 trillion in student loans, and the debt is a burden for many. 13% of federal student loan borrowers have not made payments on their debt during the, quote, on-ramp period, with 3/4 citing financial concerns as the primary reason for missing payments. That's according to a Pew Trust survey. According to our next guest, just a 1% decrease in college costs could have a major impact on the economy and Americans' personal finances. Joining me now, we've got Kamal Bhatia, who is the CEO of Principal Asset Management. Kamal, great to have you here with us. So, a 1%, lower cost for college. I mean, what does that look like quantified on a dollar basis, if we will?
Sure, Brad, good to be with you. So maybe I could take a step back and frame it for you. So we do this study across the globe, across 41 markets. And one of the things we wanted to focus on, it's called the Global Financial Inclusion Study we do, is to really think about the value of education and really frame the education policy impact on investments and investment outcomes. And what we did was the study, and we looked at that if a 7% increase in individuals attending higher ed across the world happened, it would lead to a 10% increase in GDP per capita over 5 years, which is quite amazing because the whole purpose here, I was listening to your prior guest, is about increasing affordability of higher ed and getting more people to participate in that. And then what we looked at was if you do it on a globally population-weighted basis, it would require an 8% reduction in cost for a 7% increase in enrollment. The most interesting thing, which I go back to your 1% number, is it would only take 1% in US to get to the same outcome, which is quite substantial because US is one of the most expensive places to go to higher ed. That is obviously because we have a very, very high quality higher ed system, but there is a very high cost of attending it when you include the total cost of attending higher ed in the United States.
So with that in mind, what are some of the biggest perhaps life movements that have to get pushed out as a result of the costs? And we talk about this time and time again, but I think for the amount of college debt that's being held and the amount of costs that people are incurring going into college as a family decision, it's not just having an impact on the person that is getting the education, but more largely perhaps the family as well.
You're so right. So I think it's fascinating we use this term student debt, and the idea really should be student equity or human equity. And the two ideas are, how can we get college, and college is broadly defined, to be more affordable in terms of the total cost of doing that, so that not only do we have less debt burden, but we also have people think through going to higher ed as an equity creation. You know, it's fascinating. We talk about, as investors, a lot about monetary and fiscal policy and the impact it has on us as individuals and us as society, but also in terms of our investment outcomes. I do think a focus on education policy is very important around affordability and kind of reframing the value of education as equity rather than debt.
You know, as we think about students and how they're prioritizing the return on investment from any type of equity that they are getting in the relationship there from the college experience, how are you looking across where this and the future of work really ties into that too? Because there is that consideration, making sure that you're going in for a study or a field where you're going to be able to not just pay down debt, but make sure that you're earning a living on the other side that you can benefit from as well.
That's absolutely a great point, Brad. So we are one of the largest managers of retirement plans around the world, and obviously a top retirement focused firm in the United States. And if you really think about this idea of the role of education that leads to student outcomes that eventually seeps in when you start work around savings and saving for retirement, our view is, I think, learning how to build equity early on, mostly through saving habits, is something not only do we teach at school, but kind of encourage the employers and the employees to actively participate on. Our view is if the debt burden is large, you essentially defer savings, you defer this ability to invest in your own retirement, and that perpetual cycle continues for a long period of time. So our view is encouraging better savings habits and thinking through what you invest in and the value it creates, just in terms of whether you're doing it for retirement or entering a workforce is very, very important. So looking at the risk reward of what you do with your career and your savings is very, very important.
Kamal, just lastly, while we have you here, our previous guest brought this up in what has been annexed to and tied back to President-elect Trump with Project 2025. And within there are some of the knocks on education and more largely an attempt to reframe or pivot the education system. Within that, too, if we think about college, that could also mean that there's an impact to the types of colleges and universities, the types of funding that they get as well. How do you think that impacts the cost of college long term as well?
It's a great point. I think expanding the aperture of what we think of higher ed is absolutely the right thing, particularly with the advent of technology and AI, where it's going to take us. So I think you brought up this concept that higher ed is not just the very large colleges in America, but community colleges are an effective part of it, which certainly are affordable for many communities. But also the idea of training for technical skills is absolutely a valued focus. So I am personally a big supporter of thinking about the definition of higher ed to be more expansive. It's about skill training. It's about learning an ability to, as I said earlier, to manage how you manage your savings and learn about finance, but also getting more technical skills that are more valuable as a career choice.
Kamal Bhatia, who is the Principal Asset Management CEO. Thanks so much for taking the time, Kamal.
Absolutely, Brad.